and the last endgames I will show you on this topic is knight against a pawn. When we have a knight and opponent has a pawn, we are fighting for a draw, so the side which has knight, because you can win the position with the knight, and we just have to stop the pawn. Usually our king might be far away, so we can only use our knight, and when the opponent has a pawn on the border, so rook's pawn, the position or squares where we want our knight to get are these four, so some circle or square, not sure how to call the shape. Yeah, it's probably square. And our knight can go from one square to another, and it can't be like black can't get rid of this knight. So let's try and look for some ideas. First idea you might see is knight f5, as we directly intending to play knight e3. But let's see if it's not too late. King g2 here doesn't make sense, as we know that knight d3 is the correct move for us, and we gain a tempo by playing that. So king g2 is just a mistake. King g1 seems to be better, because after knight e3, black is sure that white will not have a check in near future, and after knight e3, h2, the position is simply winning for black. So we let black go too far, but we doesn't have some other way to get our knight close. Probably we can try knight e6. Knight e6, black can go king g2 because of fork, and we will take the pawn. So more logical is king g1 or king g3, and you might take a guess which move is correct, and I will reveal that the correct move is king g3, because after king g1 we'll attack the pawn and give a fork, so we will make a draw. But king g3 avoids this fork and restricts the knight as well. So here knight g5 leads to h2 and knight e4 check king g2, black will promote. And knight e4 is probably similar, because we will play h2. I think that h2 is alright, because after knight e2 check, we can just go with our king away and control g3. White doesn't have any check, so h1 is promotion. So here in this case we don't have enough time to place our knight correctly, and therefore it is losing position. In the next position, the knight somewhere else, and you probably know the correct move, because as I said before, these are the square where we want our knight to be, and it is logical that knight g4 is a good move. And I can show you some variations. So king h1 doesn't make much sense, as we'll play knight f2, probably king g1, but king g1 doesn't do anything, because we can get our king closer and we're threatening to take the pawn after h2, so it's not okay. King g2 might be good, and so as king g3. King h2 also doesn't threat with anything, because we can just bring our king closer and black has to move his king. Here he goes to f3, it allows us to play knight h2 and stay in this area. So probably king g3. But here there are two squares we can go on, which we want to stay within these squares, and knight h2 is a big mistake because we'll just leave our knight hanging. So knight e3, and knight e3 is stopping h2 because of knight f1 check. So probably king f3, but it is also knight f1 here. And as you can see, if our knight is in any of these squares, we also have two squares to go on, so black can't get rid of this knight because he can't control two distant squares. So he'll just attack our knight, and here we'll just repeat the moves or this way, and we will control black from pushing the pawn in every of these positions. So this is just a draw. Here we can look at another example. In case we get positions like this, we want to get our knight in front of the pawn, but this is too late for it because our knight is far away and these two squares are controlled. So we have to find some another way to stop the pawn. Mostly you have to calculate precisely because there's just some calculations and only a few patterns, but there's not too much of them. More complex knight endgames are probably similar to the pawn endgames because usually when the pawn endgame is winning, so without the knights, the endgame with the knights is also winning, and knight endgames might be really various, so there is not that much theory to knight endgames. But let's go to this position with two logical moves which will get our knight closer, and probably we aim to get our knight as close as possible, and we can help with some checks or threats, taking the pawn, etc. So let's start to calculate. Knight f2 might be a bit more unnatural because surely we are threatening something or avoiding c2, because after c2 we'll attack the pawn and this leads to fork. So c2 is a mistake, but black can try to stop our knight from going to d4 with king d3. And here I'm not sure if I can see any way to stop the pawn. Just knight d6 leads to c2, and there's no way to stop this pawn, and we can give a check to black king when the king and knight stays diagonally and there is one square between them, so check doesn't help us here, or we doesn't have any in the near future. So knight f5 is just probably a mistake, and the knight e6 looks better. Also here after c2 we'll play knight d4 and make a draw in the same way. So there are two logical continuations for black, which are king d3 and king e3. King e3 is probably easier to calculate, because now we'll just get our knight to c5 and king can go back because knight d4 checks, so c2, and here knight b3, and we get our knight in front of the pawn, which means that we will make a draw. We can look at it, but here we'll also have some square to go away, and control the c1, or basically the square of promotion. If black waits, that brings nothing, because after king e6, king b2, knight e2, or even knight d3 is a good move, but knight e2 seems to be more straightforward. And here black can't make any progress and it is a draw. So king d3, and here we have two checks to decide or to consider, and probably just one of them is correct, so you should be careful about your next move. And which check do you think is better? I can show the issues in both checks. After knight f4, black can go on e3, but he will go back probably and still threatening c2. But after knight c5, black king can attack the knight and getting out of some checking area. So both moves might have some issues, but the issue with knight c5, king c4 is much bigger, because here we have to stop the pawn and get our knight somewhere, but we can go to b3 or d3, because these scores are controlled by the king. And if we play knight d4, c2, we really don't have a way to stop the pawn. Probably some forks, but the forks are not possible as well. So this is the end, and knight f4 looks better, because if kings go closer to our knight, we'll go to e2 and under the pawn, which means that the endgame is drawish, and king e4 might not be that good, so king d2, but after king d2 we'll just repeat the position with knight e6, and again black has to stop knight d4, but he doesn't have any other ways than king d3 or king e3. So this is it, king e3 leads to knight d5, this is a draw, and any other move leaves e2 square free for our knight, and surely we will use it in that case. So here, or in position like this, you just need to get your knight closer, and best position might be under the pawn to stop it, and you will or you will always have a square to go, and it can be every pawn from b to g file, probably when there is a pawn on a2 or h2, so the rook spawn on the second rank. That is not good to put our knight on these scores, because it will have only two moves, and these restrictions might result in losing the game. Probably if black get his king to b2, he'll be threatening to take the knight. But we'll see something similar here, or much here, but this position is different, because here the draw is simple. We'll just play king f2 or king f1, and we would make a draw even if the knight wasn't there. So what is the idea or task in this diagram? And if you think that it is to win for white, you are correct, because this position is winning, but we have to decide on which square we'll go with the king. So take a while, calculate the position, because only one square is good, and try to guess the right move. I probably might present you the idea of how we can win this game, and it is not that hard, because if you imagine our king on f2 and knight on f1. I can't make the 0, so knight on f1. Black will be forced to play g3, which would lead to knight g3, right? Or he would be forced to play h2, sorry, and this would be mate. But we have to find a way for knight to get it there and calculate the tempos correctly. So probably what will happen if we make an opposition. Black can't play h2 because of the mate, so he has to move his king. We probably do the same. If you let black king to go away from the corner, it is just a draw. So king e2, king h1, and here we need to get our knight somewhere, or not somewhere, but on f1, and we need to get it there somehow. But let's look at the ways. It's not good to get our knight via g3 usually, because here it is threatening, or it might be stalemate if it was black to move. And after knight f1, king h1, we are decide to move, so black will not play h2 because we have to move first. And if you look at the movement of the knight changed the color of the square every move, so we just can't lose a tempo with the knight or make some triangle, because his movement will be just repetitive from black to white square, and we can't do it because of that. So let's look at our king, but our king has also no way to lose a move or to lose tempo, because simply if we move our king, black will go away with his one and it will be a draw. So here we have to consider king f1, or not, we was considering king f1, we have to consider king f2, because here the moves or the tempos might be alright for us. Also, again, h2 is made in 1, so king h2, but here we can get our knight to f1 via g3, because knight g3 is still made. But if king h1 was possible, knight f1 would win the game with that mate, so it might be the right way to proceed, because the moves will be suiting us, or tempos will be suiting us. But let's try another way. If g3 is not a good square, we have to find some other. Here we are decided to move, and black's next move is king h1, so we should be also aware of black stalemating himself. So we should control g3 as well. We don't have to do it now, but move later. So there are just few squares which avoid us to do that. I can mark them. So these are the squares, also the h5, but it doesn't help us because we need to get our knight to yeah, I will mark it like that. We need to get our knight to f1, and let's look at our possibilities. e2 might not help us, because only way to go to f1 from e2 is via g3, which is not that good. So let's get e2 away, and now there are two squares, e4 and f5, and probably the both ways might be alright, because after knight g7 and knight f5 we control the g3, and here we have a time to get our knight to f1 and give a mate. Also, we try to get our knight there via e4, will be successful because here h2 leads to mate, so king h2, and we will by knight d2 with the same pattern as before and win the game. But this is probably, this position might happen occasionally, so it is just some interesting pattern or idea, but if black king is not trapped in the corner, he will easily make a draw. So this was my last puzzle in this chapter, and we will continue with the bishop's endgame.